Cooper Flagg and the Blue Devils shined at Madison Square Garden, the mecca of basketball, on the enormous stage blasting Illinois. Is their A game the best in the sport? Find out next on Locked On College Basketball Game Night.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the 8th installment of Locked On College Basketball Game Night, where we get to talk about the nitty-gritty of the games we saw this weekend, give you live reactions and much, much more. I'm Leif Tulane, host of Locked On NBA Big Board, credentialed NBA draft analyst, contributor to Locked On College Basketball, and just all-around lover of hoops. And I'm excited to host a show about what I love most, Saturdays, chock full of college hoops. So thank you guys for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Tonight's show is presented by FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, the FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So sign up right now and test your luck with that $5 and get, if you win, $150 in bonus bets back. In the first segment today, we're going to break down the clash within MSG and a shifting of tides in the WCC. In the second segment, we'll head to the SEC to analyze what went down between Tennessee and Texas A&M. What are the ramifications of that matchup, which you figured to be feisty, and it was, but it also factored in a lot of shooting. And then we go to Bama versus Kentucky, where you're going to expect a ton of offense, and boy, was there. But what is there to make in the SEC, where their conference is loaded? And in the final segment, I'll discuss the massive clash that had Houston seize control of the Big 12 once and for all, and talk about just how good Houston is. Plus, talk about a big upset that just went down in Tucson. Let's dive right in. So Duke dominated from the get-go. It's just what it is. Illinois wasn't right. I want to preface that yes, I think Duke was going to win anyway. They came in as 8-point favorites, and I think they would have been favorites nonetheless in a neutral site. But Illinois isn't necessarily a team that you became accustomed to seeing when they were fully right. They were dealing with sicknesses and all that. But the story is Duke. Cooper Flagg and Duke dominated from the get-go. Many players scored easily all night. And Isaiah Evans, I've said this before on Locked On College Basketball as well as on Locked On Blue Devils, Isaiah Evans is the X factor for Duke. When he's good, you can't touch him. And that's why I asked, do you think when they have their A game that they're the best team in the country? Because there's some numbers that would indicate so. They had 7 in double digits today, and they scored over 100. Duke has had an exceedingly high floor, and they still do, because their defense is excellent. When they get offense that is like what they had, and it doesn't even have to be as prolific as it was, it's always going to be difficult to beat them. And as it is, when Duke's lost, it's come down to Cooper Flagg turning the ball over late, 2 of the 3 times slipping. Duke is the number 1 team in KenPom right now with a 2nd-rated offensive rating and 4th-rated defensive rating. And honestly, I think their defense is better than their offense because it's more consistent, and that's why I say that's their floor. Now, as for Illinois is not playing their best basketball, and that's not been something that's been atypical. They're 17-11. But everyone talked about how Duke has been beating up on the ACC because it's a weak conference and all that. But it doesn't detract from the fact that they've been taking care of business. When it's been close, they've lost games, but if it's not close, that's not their fault. Now, admittedly, Illinois has been sick and injured, so maybe that was part of why Duke shot so well. The defense wasn't there. But 12 of 23 from 3 is not replicable for Duke. But, geez, when they shoot it well, watch out. And it wasn't just one guy in this case. Like I said, 7 in double digits. And Cooper Flagg, I felt like had his fingerprints on this game because he always does. He's impactful. He knows what he's doing. He finds a way to make impact plays always. However, he didn't need to score. In the first half, where Duke already established an assertive 17-point lead, they had Cooper Flagg for a while only scored 2 points, but yet he was still the player that you were most fearful of on the basketball court. That's the power of Cooper Flagg. Now, when Con Knipple and Isaiah Evans are hitting shots, I think that's what constitutes Duke reaching its A game. And that's what scares me most, because when Duke is shooting well, then their defense is good. They also have the threat of the rim running ability of Common Malawach. They have the slashing of Cooper Flagg and the depth that they have that very few possess, but not just depth in terms of, we play a few bodies, but they play stars and 5 stars. And I know there's a lot of teams that say, oh, Duke just gets talent. Well, they do, but they have pieces that fit together this year. And when they're clicking, it's just about knocking down shots because there's nothing you can do. You look at this game, and Illinois had some guys with what you'd consider decent games, but they're without their best player. Not without their best player, excuse me. They're without the depth to support their best player. Kasparas Jakučionis was 4 of 10, 0 of 4 from 3, got to the line a little bit, had 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Like, that's not a bad game. 14, 7, and 6 for a freshman against a vaunted defense. But that's where it falls off. They got nothing from Ben Hamrukhaus, who just not able to knock down shots in this one, 0 of 5 from 3. And you need to score and knock down shots from the outside against Duke, who can prevent you from scoring on the interior. Will Riley was 2 of 7. He's an offensive spark plug. This team's just lacking for juice right now and have been searching for answers. Trey White a few games ago didn't play at all, and this game was their leading scorer. So that speaks to lack of continuity. And then the last point about Duke, they had 7 players scoring double digits, and here are their field goals. Cooper Flagg, 5 of 10. He had 16. Then you go to Con Knippel, 6 of 9. 6 of 9, Common Malach. 4 of 9, Proctor. 4 of 9, James. 5 of 8, Evans. 5 of 6, Foster. All of those guys were extremely efficient. They shot 56% from the field and 53% from the three-point line. You're not going to beat Duke ever if they're shooting over 50 from the three-point line. Never, especially at that volume. Duke is, to me, the team with the best A game. I said this a couple years ago at Arizona, where I didn't believe in them as much as I do Duke. And this is the Arizona team with Benedict Mathurin and a team with Christian Coloco. And I actually had the privilege of watching them play their first round against Wright State and their second round against TCU. And it was an awesome basketball game. But my point being, that team, when they got going, could run away from teams in a way that no one else could that year. But they had these slip-ups and a lack of continuity in close games. You didn't know what you were going to get. I think this Duke team's better because their defense is more consistently good than that Arizona team's. But you got pros, you got a similar foundation, and I think Duke needs to work on finding out who they are and what their execution pattern is outside of Cooper Flagg going and getting a bucket late in games. But they're going to run away from teams even in the NCAA tournament. That's a scary thought because this team's young and only getting better. So a team that's used to running away from the competition and done that in the tournament and have certainly beaten up in their league, just like Duke is doing in the ACC, was Gonzaga, who dominated the WCC for years. For years. Well, right now, I don't think they're the king of the WCC anymore. I think it's St. Mary's. St. Mary's for this year and last year, but they just seem to have Gonzaga's number, and Gonzaga seems to be in a free fall right now. St. Mary's beat Gonzaga at Gonzaga, completing the season sweep and taking an insurmountable, or at least I believe it to be insurmountable, lead on the WCC. Having beaten Gonzaga twice, holding a 3-game advantage. Gonzaga has 4 WCC losses, and St. Mary's has just 1. Augustus Marciulionis is the best player in the WCC, even though it's not flashy. Nembhard's awesome. EK is going to put up numbers. But Augustus Marciulionis and Randy Bennett have come up with a way to beat teams, and they're becoming more adaptable to playing with more pace. For years, St. Mary's, tough team to play. They establish their own tempo, but if you can stay close, you got a chance to beat them. Well, they lose Aiden Mahaney. They lose Jefferson, 2 excellent players playing at very good teams. And Mahaney's at UConn, and Jefferson's one of the key cogs for an Iowa State team that's contending for a national championship. Oh, fret not. Randy Bennett, what has he done? Just put his team to a unbelievable record with 1 loss in the WCC, goes into Spokane and beats the Zags. Mikey Lewis comes out of nowhere, and he's been excellent this year. He's been a guy that was not highly recruited. He was in Oakland. He was near Moraga, California, and he excels. In the big games, he stepped up enormously and provided a secondary scoring punch to support Augustus Marciulionis' playmaking and the attention he draws. It's been sensational. And then Gonzaga, you saw lineup changes. And this is not only this game, but they've been searching for an identity. They seem to be better on defense and maybe better as a whole when Graham Ike is not in, but then they don't score consistently enough because the team needs the ball to find its way to Ike to set up their other players. Nembhard's not a scorer. He's a great facilitator. Hickman, been a little bit inconsistent. And they lose a guy like Anton Watson, who was kind of the glue that he placed a Band-Aid on a lot of injuries last year. And this year, And I'm not saying injuries physically. I'm just saying wounds. The team was not perfectly built. And Anton Watson provided a way to stitch that up. They don't have that guy this year. They have moving pieces. They go get Michael Ajayi. They're more athletic. They rebound well, but he's not a perfect fit. It moves a strange rotation. Battle. He shoots well, but he's streaky. And you don't know exactly what you're getting every night. And I don't think Mark Few is accustomed to having guys that are a little bit unreliable. And it's thrown him for a loop. And meanwhile, reliability is the word that you can associate with Randy Bennett. You know he's going to play great defense. You know they're going to play physically. They're going to get a spark from Lewis, then they're even more difficult to beat. 18 points from Lewis. Saxon grabbed 9 boards. Marshallone is, of course, the key engine. But they found an identity. And you got 14 from Barrett, and you get occasional buckets from guys like Ross, Morauskas, and they're going to score enough points because their defense is consistently that excellent. Now, on the other hand, Gonzaga's leading scorer was EK, but he came off the bench. And then you look at the rest. Nolan Hickman had 12 shots, 2 of 7 from 3 to get to 14. That's not going to be enough to cut it, especially at the levels that Gonzaga's used to scoring. They're used to scoring 90 points routinely. And in this game, it was in Spokane, and St. Mary's punched them in the mouth early and often and never really let go of the rope and never lost the lead. So I think there's a new king of the WCC. I'm very curious to see if they can cement this with a deep tournament run, perhaps a Sweet 16, maybe an Elite 8. But they play a style of basketball. It's difficult to win in March because every game's going to be close because they play so slowly. But that's what I'm proud of St. Mary's for doing. They're playing a little more quickly, giving themselves a little more margin for error. Well, speaking of margin for error, we're going to talk about a league in which there is very little in the SEC coming up next. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action and stay engaged all game long. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. For example, I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All righty, welcome back to Locked On College Basketball Game Night. Leaf Tulane with you here late into the wee hours of Sunday morning as I just got back from working a Jazz game and watching tons of college hoops as well. So the SEC, every week we got to talk about them because they play a lot of highly ranked matchups. So one of the highly ranked ones was Tennessee taking on Texas A&M from College Station, and the Volunteers, in a back-and-forth affair, basically out-executed, and they shot well, as did Texas A&M. But basically, they played each other and proved Tennessee's the better version of a team that's defensively oriented, and if they get any offense, it's extremely hard to beat when they're rebounding and playing defense as they typically do. Chaz Lanier was red hot, absolutely red hot. Tennessee's been the better team. They've been ranked higher throughout the year, but Texas A&M and Tennessee have very similar models in which they play intense defense. They have elite athletes. They're very physical. They get rebounds, and they have a few guys that if they get hot, and Chaz Lanier is the guy for Tennessee, and Wade Taylor is the guy for Texas A&M. If they're hot, exceptionally difficult to beat. But if they're cold, you can beat them because they're not naturally gifted scoring teams. And you just got to score enough points. Well, in this game, I expected the score to be very low, as did the odds makers. The odds makers said it was 130 points likely to be scored. They well exceeded that. So Chaz Lanier was red hot to start, and that's what led to this scoring onslaught compared to what you expected. And Zakai Ziegler closed it. If those guys get going for Tennessee, they're very difficult to beat because their defense is always going to keep them in the game. I mentioned this about Duke. Duke's better than Tennessee, but they have the same recipe. Tennessee is the #1 defense in the country, so every game they've got a chance. And every game they've got a chance because their defense is that good. Like, just think about it. If you give up 87.5 points per 100 possessions, that means in a game with fewer than 100 possessions, you're typically going to have teams scoring fewer than points than what you average in a 40-minute game. And of course, because they're a good team, they win a lot of games, that their average is going to be true. But if you extrapolate that out, even against good teams, you have a chance because you're going to keep them under their average and out of their rhythm. So my question is, why did Texas A&M leave Chaz Lanier open so often? Like, Jemai Mashak is not a very good shooter. Igor Milicic has been the epitome of inconsistent this year, shooting from deep. Felix Okpara underneath is not a guy you have to worry about. And Jordan Gainey's been inconsistent as well. Why was Chaz Lanier able to knock down 7 threes to start the game? I mean, he started 6 of 6 from deep. How is he getting so many shots, especially from a team that prides itself on defense, because they're basically Tennessee light in Texas A&M? And Texas A&M had every chance to win this game. I don't want to say that it was one-sided. This game was back and forth, and you had the chances to win. It was a game where the largest lead was like 2 or 3 for most of the second half, and it kept switching who possessed that lead. Texas A&M, here's their recipe. They're always good in defense, and they can survive inefficiency from Wade Taylor and Zurich Phelps for a while because they get so many offensive rebounds and they get steals and turn the ball over. So more possessions nullifies the inefficiency. But Wade Taylor's essentially, if you boil down his last 5 games, he's been about 33% from the field in all of them. 5 of 15 is basically what the box score would indicate for 5 straight games. And he's their offense. When he's going, they're tough to beat. And then if he's not, they still give him and Zurich Phelps the shots, and they crash the glass insatiably. Well, Tennessee can take away some of that, but even then, Anderson Garcia, a few other guys stepped up and knocked down shots, so they kept pace. But why was Tennessee able to get the ball to their star player knocking down the shots, and Tennessee forced the ball away from Texas A&M, and their supplementary players knocked down shots? So I felt like Buzz Williams got outcoached in this one, and at the end of the game, Wade Taylor was overzealous and shot some bad shots, and it cost them the game. And defensively, had a horrible lapse on an inbounds pass down 3 with 4 seconds on the shot clock, about 25 seconds left in the game, and Zakai Ziegler stuck a dagger. A winning team, Tennessee, I still have concerns about them, because if I were playing Tennessee, I'd deny Chaz Lanier, face guard him, play 4-on-4 versus the rest, but I don't think Tennessee can really punish you. And I still think they have offensive warts. But the fact they've been able to gut out a few wins like this, especially on the road, and have big shots made by Ziegler, by Gainey, it makes them harder to beat, and you have to play a more complete game. But I do think both of these teams are a bit of flash in the pan and pretenders rather than contenders. I think Tennessee is a better version of Texas A&M, who relies less on one player because they have more good players, but they're still offensively inept compared to those that have similar aspirations of hanging a banner. Now, speaking of teams that are not offensively inept and in fact are very adept offensively, that's Bama and Kentucky. They do not struggle to score. The line was at 180, which is very, very high for college basketball. Kentucky built a lead early in Bama. Bama beat Kentucky early in the year. And I wondered to myself, after Bama had lost against Auburn at Bama and then had gotten beaten badly by Missouri, is Bama a little shell-shocked? Are they finding out who they really are? Because they didn't look very good to start this game. But then there was a 180. Kentucky built that lead, but Bama used a 22-4 to run to take that lead and never looked back. Sears had 30 points. They hit 11 threes and hit 21 free throws. Had Youngblood and Holloway combined for 8 threes. And Bama made 11 threes, but it wasn't particularly efficient. They shot 35%, but that's plenty good enough compared to what Bama shot in the season, hovering around 30%. They don't have the personnel to shoot the lights out in the way that Kentucky does, nor do they run the offense and get those guys the same shots, but they get a ton of good looks because they're very analytically driven, and Mark Sears is able to drive to the paint when he's making the right plays and kicking the ball out and scoring opportunistically and looking for his shot, getting to the paint and using his drive to set up his jump shot. Alabama was very difficult to beat because their floor has been raised by Cliff Omarui, who transferred in, has made this defense from what it was last year, 111th, even after the tournament when they made the Final Four run, 111th on Ken Palm, and now they're in the 30s. And that's a huge lift. Cliff's not getting the all-SEC, the all-American buzz that you expect a guy with the paycheck that he was paid to get, but he's made all the difference to make them have a more sustainable chance of competing. But their three-point shooting needs to be more consistent in order to truly contend. But in this one, knocked down 11 threes and limited Kentucky's most consistent scorer, Otega Owe, who hadn't scored under 10 all season, to just 2 points, who got in trouble with foul trouble. One thing to note about Kentucky is they're severely injured right now. Their best player, in my opinion, their most valuable player, Lamont Butler, is out with a shoulder injury. Jackson Robinson's dealing with a wrist injury. So those are two guys that get starters minutes that are missing. Instead, you're getting freshmen in Perry and Noah to play, and that's a totally different look. Kentucky's going to be just fine scoring the basketball, but if they play any team that's built to score the basketball, with or without Lamont Butler, who's an excellent defender in his own regard, they're still an inept defense, and that causes me concern about their long-term potential. So what do you make of these teams? I think Alabama's the better team. There's nothing new here. If Bama hits 11 threes, they're going to be exceptionally difficult to beat. But I do think they're beatable more so than a team like Duke, who can lock down the side of the floor if they're not shooting well. When Bama's not been shooting well, they still give up baskets more easily than Duke. Duke fits the parameters of the team that wins. You know, the typical archetype of top 20 in offense and defense. In fact, they're top 5 in each. Alabama is a bit more on the outliers that have done it 3 of the last 25 years, where you have the team that's top 5, top 10 in one metric and top 40 in the other. Those are a little less frequent. So they're good. Now, Auburn and Florida might be really, really good. Both teams, I didn't feel like played their best, but both teams found their way to double-digit victory. So a team's not playing their best in the best conference in basketball found a way to double-digit victories. And in Florida's case, they did so without Alex Condon, who, I'll make a case, he and Tommy Hauck are more valuable than Elijah Martin, who's probably going to be an all-SEC guy. And I feel pretty confident in that case. And I think there's an outside world in which those two guys combined are more valuable than Walter Clayton, who's going to be a first-team All-American, because Florida has such a talented backcourt that when Clayton and or Martin's out, that there's other guys such as Denzel Aberdeen and Urban to knock down shots. You need all of them to win it all, but Florida's really, really good and being slept on a little bit. By the way, Missouri and Arkansas battled. Missouri, could they back up the big win against Alabama, against a desperate Arkansas team playing in Arkansas? Arkansas, in a back-and-forth affair, found the way through, picked up what was a much-needed win, and have put themselves squarely on the bubble and perhaps on the right side of the bubble. After a break, we're going to talk about a team that needs no help with the bubble and might be a true championship contender hiding in plain sight that's not getting enough talk. And then another team that pulled an upset and has found their way into the tournament, the main draw, as opposed to being on the bubble. We're talking Big 12 next after a break. You're listening to Locked On College Basketball. Welcome back to Locked On College Basketball Game Night. I'm Leif Tulane with you here, recapping a fun Saturday of hoops, and we're going to talk about the Big 12. And this is my biggest takeaway. I saved it for last because may not have the brand of Duke playing at MSG or the SEC with numerous teams playing ranked matchup on ranked matchup, but Houston's legit. Houston's really good. They beat a resilient Iowa State team. They were missing some of their scores. Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones were both out. Those are two of their best players, their two leading scorers. But what impressed me about this game was nothing to do with Iowa State or Houston's, what they were missing versus what they had. It was the way that Houston approaches basketball. Every game, they're going to give you their absolute all defensively and on the glass. That gives them an exceptionally high floor. And we're talking about this in a motif. I'm purposely telling you about which teams have high floors and how they make themselves better. Houston has perhaps the highest floor that you can have. They made the Sweet 16 a bunch of times in a row because they defend and they get rebounds and they overwhelm you athletically. So against the lower seeds, they're going to win. Now, what they've ran into in March has been teams that score more efficiently than they do and more easily than they do are able to beat them despite their incredible defense because they're inept on offense and don't have scores. This year, Houston's a little bit different. They're shooting excellently. They're shooting 39% from three. And I'll get to why. But 39% from three is very good. They don't shoot a ton of them. Like Alabama shoots about 40 per game. Houston shoots a little over 20. And they make 8. That's not a ton. But making 8 We were talking about Alabama, if they're really difficult to beat if they make 11. Duke made 12, and we're talking about how difficult they are to beat. So a slight outlier in the positive direction for Houston is putting them at 10 threes. That's 30 points to spot Houston. And then you give them all the extra possessions of steals and offensive rebounds. Man, good luck. Good luck beating them. They have scorers. Late in the games, they found a way to score through the interior with J1 Roberts. LJ Cryer was sensational in this one against Iowa State. And by the way, this Iowa State team was exceptionally resilient. They struggled early in this game. Houston seemed to be coasting to an easy victory, and then Iowa State went on an amazing run within Houston, at Houston. And Iowa State gave them all they could handle. And Houston had the resiliency, the poise, and the big shot making at big junctures to put this game on ice. And LJ Cryer, at one point in this game, it was, hey, give me the ball. I'm going to go get a basket. And you haven't seen that very much. And I don't love that recipe typically, but man, was LJ Cryer stupendous tonight. Houston has also benefited greatly from the development internally from Milos Uzan. Uzan has become a guy who at the beginning of the year, Kelvin Sampson, the head coach of Houston, likened to stealing a brother's idea, a big brother's ID to get into a bar, saying, he's playing with the big boys, so he's going to try to pose as one, and he's not quite ready. And Kelvin now has said, you know what, son, you're ready. You're ready to play with the big boys, and you're going to thrive. And Uzan has gotten better to the tune of a 4-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio and is an effective scorer. And more than an effective scorer. He scores in big moments, knocks down threes, gets to his floater, which is beautiful. He can score at the rim, and he's making the right reads, as you can see with the 4-to-1 assist-to-turnover. And at the end of the games, they got numerous guys. It wasn't just LJ Cryer's big game where he scored point after point and jump shot after jump shot, tickling the twine. He was able to swing the ball out, and Emmanuel Sharp hit a big shot to ice the game. Roberts gets rebounds. JoJo Tugler's probably the best defender in the country. And in a game that was played at Houston's pace, LJ Cryer had 28 points on 11 of 17 shooting. Yeah, you can't expect that type of efficiency, but they also held an Iowa State team that's very good to 59 points. So that you can expect from Houston, and that's why they're so dangerous. This is a team that's hitting threes and doing so more sustainably, and that's all season. And, of course, they do their rebounding. They do their defense. They steal the ball. They're an incredibly stingy team. They played against a very good defensive team. And this team in Iowa State, the reason I was impressed is they knew their identity today was not to try to outscore a team because they've become a very good offensive team. They're missing two of their best scorers. So they decided we're going to just hunker down and play defense. And Houston beat them more with their offense than they did with their defense. And, of course, their defense is still excellent. Houston doesn't score beautifully, but LJ Cryer and Sharp hit threes. Uzan found a way to score. And Jawan Roberts, it may not be pretty, but he goes to that sweeping left jump hook, and he makes it. Their identity is always going to be defense first, but if they can shoot it, it opens up rebounding, steals, and physicality to not be what they're reliant on, but what the cause of them blowing teams out is. That's a big difference and really speaks to their ceiling raising. I think Houston's a national championship contender that's been hiding in plain sight. In all the bracketology, they've been a 2 seed. In the bracketology reveal, they were the 8, meaning that they were the 4th 2 seed. Well, they're better than Tennessee, in my opinion. I don't think it's close. And Tennessee's the second best. They're miles better than Purdue, and Purdue is greatly flawed. I've said this for a while. If you guys listen to this, you've heard that. So thank you to the everydayers. And they're way better than Texas A&M. So that puts them in the 1 line because Alabama loses. I don't know if they end up at the 1, but they have a very clear path to being a 1 seed once again. And no one's talking about them because they lost to Auburn early in the year. Look what Auburn is now. And in that loss to Auburn, they played very closely. They just didn't shoot that well, and Auburn scored a little better at the end of the game. We'd be talking so differently if they'd won that game or won against Alabama in overtime on a neutral site. They lost close games, but that was when Uzan was not playing well. Their point guard wasn't playing well. And they went to overtime with the number 5 team in the country and played a very, very close game against what most people consider the best team in the country in Auburn. So Houston, I'm typically skeptical of. I almost always am because I don't think they score well enough. I think this team does. I'm going to buy them to my Final Four, depending the bracket. Now, speaking of a team that was nowhere near my radar in terms of where they are now and where they are in brackets, that's BYU. BYU went into the desert and beat the Wildcats of Arizona, who have been surging recently. Richie Saunders, a stud. Side note, little anecdote. When I was a sophomore in high school, I would always look at the box scores for people in my state. I'm from Utah. And Richie Saunders played at a high school called River Team. He was a freshman, and a freshman starting in a 6A school, pretty rare. but leading them in scoring, very rare. So I made a little note to myself, I'm going to track this guy. So the next year I went to Wasatch Academy, which is one of the premier basketball boarding schools and academies. And now look at him. Should be first team all Big 12, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a cup of tea in the NBA. BYU has won 8 of 10 and 4 in a row. And BYU was able to win this game in Arizona, scoring a ton against a very good defensive Arizona team. Yes, everyone's going to talk about that call at the end of the game, and personally, I don't think it was a foul either. But Richie knocked down the free throws. Arizona battled valiantly. It wasn't that they folded. It was that BYU went and took it to them. They knocked down threes. They were able to get good shots even when Arizona was putting the pressure on. They missed free throws and didn't shrink and fold and say, oh, man, we missed these free throws, therefore we're going to lose. This game could have been lost by an inexperienced team, a team that's BYU's old because they have a bunch of return missionaries and older players, but they have young pieces on this team, and those guys played admirably as well. Richie Saunders led the way, 8 of 10 from the field, 23 points. Yegor Demon had 13 and 8, and it's very good. I know he had 6 turnovers, but Yegor Demon making as many shots as he made is good because that means he's putting pressure on the defense, and he's an excellent passer. Moet Mag, transfer from Rutgers, known for his defense, timely threes in this one. Timely threes, and he's shooting about 40% from 3 in Big 12 play after being known as a non-shooter for much of this year and much of his career. Keita, 5 of 5 from the field. They've got ways to score. This is a team that's dangerous in March, and I think they've cemented their place in the dance. I think they're making the dance after what was not a very impressive start. And Kenan Catchings, off the bench, a freshman, scored 14 points in 15 minutes. As for Arizona, Caleb Love, I think you got the good Caleb Love. I know he scored a lot late, so maybe that tints my mind, but he scored 27 points, and he went 9 of 10 from the free throw line, 4 of 9 from 3. He gave you a chance in this one, and so he's usually the scapegoat, but no one to blame here in this one. I would love to see them play more Carter Bryant. I think he's really good. Arizona's not a team that I think scores very easily unless it's in transition. So they need to get out and run and play even faster because they got the athletes and they could play. They played 8. They could play these 8 and rotate more frequently and let Henry Visar and Awaka play separately. They're playing together, but they play separately a little bit and then speed up the game because I think that's what would help Arizona more. Arizona's going to be just fine, but this is more about BYU taking it to them and scoring 96 points in regulation at Arizona. It's a very formidable place to play. And the Cougs found a way, and I think they've inked their place in madness. And I went to a game in Provo last week. That place gets loud for games. So watch out for a team that's streaking there. Now, a couple teams to talk about the wins that they got. Michigan State, I don't have time to go over, but they went on Friday, went into Michigan and beat the Wolverines. And the Wolverines were in sole possession of first place in the Big Ten. Now it belongs to the Spartans. Jace Richardson has become the face of Michigan State. Not just, he's kind of fun off the bench. I wonder what he is. No, he's the best player, and he's playing like it. And then you have the support of Trey Holloman, who agreed to come off the bench. Tom Izzo said, you know what, we might need to start Jace Richardson. And Holloman said, you know what, that's fine with me. Scores 18 points in a big game. Amazing. Jeremy Fears got the yips. He's shooting terribly. He banks one home, and then he splashes another one, and the guy's got the smile on his face, and Tom Izzo apparently told him, it's great to see you smiling, and they're all thrilled. The vibes of the Spartans are great. Are they the most talented team in the Big Ten, much less the country? Absolutely not. But this is Tom Izzo. This is a team that's really difficult to beat because they play well together. They defend, they rebound, they shoot terribly from 3. But if they start shooting well, watch out, because they shoot 29% from 3, but they shoot 81% from the free throw line and are among the best teams at turning you over, as well as accumulating assists and grabbing rebounds. They play old school basketball, much like St. John's. So Izzo and Pitino, a little bit of a renaissance. Speaking of Pitino heads to Madison Square Garden for a clash with the 2-time defending national champion UConn Huskies tomorrow, or I guess today, by the time you guys listen to this and while I'm recording it. But college basketball is peaking right now. It's an awesome time of the year. We're almost to March. So stay with us here on Locked on College Basketball. We appreciate you listening. So thank you for making Locked on College Basketball and Locked on College Basketball Game Night your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out Locked on College Basketball in general with Isaac and Andy, who are going to analyze some of these games from the weekends, preview even more, and keep you as up to date as anyone in the business. Those guys are awesome. And they'll also tell you about their teams. Carolina and Gonzaga, who are both not what they usually are, but they give you all the details on all those teams better than anyone else. Don't wait for March. Be the most informed college basketball fan right now. So tune in to Locked On College Basketball. Thank you guys for listening. It's always a pleasure, and I'll be back with you on Wednesday on Locked On College Basketball and back on Saturday with Locked On College Basketball Game Night. Thank you guys.